Hello again, CASA friends. Miss Mia here today to talk to you about time. Alliteration. And a good way to begin talking about time is by brainstorming, taking the time to reflect upon and think about words that we often hear and use when we are talking about time. Some of those words are examples of pairs of opposites, which are called antonyms. That's right, but I digress. So here are some time words: old and young, long, short, soon or sooner, and later, now, then, before, and after, past, present, which means right now, and the future. So also we talk about time passing. How do you enjoy passing your time or spending time? I enjoy spending my time making video lessons, and I hope you enjoy spending your time watching them. So another important question about time is, in which direction does time move? Which direction does time travel? What do you think? Did you say forwards? If you did, you're correct. Time always travels forward. It keeps marching on. It doesn't travel backwards. The only way you can go back in time is through the memories in your brain or your imagination when maybe you're reading a book or watching a movie that takes place in a time that was before the present, which is right now. So another good question about time is, how do we measure time? Well, before we get into the tools that we use to measure time, I thought it would be a good idea to review other forms of measurement and the tools we use to measure things in the world around us. And we've learned about these tools before, so this is a review. So how do we measure length and height? How long or short something is? How tall or short something is? What tool do we use? Did you say ruler? That's a tool for measuring length and height. Or you could use one of these, measuring tape. That's also a good tool for measuring length and height. What tool do we use to measure temperature? Whether it's the temperature outside or the temperature of your body. Did you say a thermometer? Right again. So we use a thermometer to measure temperature. How about capacity? If we're baking a cake and we want to add a cup of flour, or we want to add 3 tablespoons of sugar, we need tools to measure capacity. Did you say a measuring cup? That's correct. And I bet if you look inside your kitchen drawers and cupboards, you'll also find measuring spoons of different capacities. Teaspoons and tablespoons and quarter teaspoons and half tablespoons. Tools for measuring capacity. What about weight? How do we measure weight? Yep, we use scales to measure weight. Let me dust off this old scale from my house. I don't use it very often, but this is an example of a digital scale that you step on to measure weight. Other types of scales are called balance scales, and you'll see those in the CASA classrooms. I think we have work on the shelves with balance scales. If you can go back in time and remember that far back, it's been months since you've been in the classroom. So back to time. What tools do we use to measure time? Well, here's a tool for measuring time with which you are quite familiar. What is this called? A calendar. That's correct. And a calendar features an increment of time called a month. And each of these boxes represents 1 day in a month. So you can measure how many days have passed, how many increments of time called days have passed in the month by using a calendar. But the tool today that we are using to talk about time and to learn to tell time, so much alliteration, is this tool. You all know what this is called, right? Of course, it's a clock. So today we're going to learn how to tell time on a clock. Specifically, this type of clock, which is called an analog clock. Can you say analog? Excellent, analog. Analog clocks are the round ones that have the numbers from 1 to 12 on them representing the hours, and they have a long hand and a short hand. And we will learn what all of these different parts of the analog clock are for. There's another kind of clock called a digital clock, and this is how digital clocks show the time. So just with numbers. This one, well, this isn't a digital clock, but this is an example of how digital time is written and read. It says 5 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. So we will move on to the rug, where you can look from up high at the clock. Okay, so we've relocated to the rug. Here we are. Now you're watching from above. Hello. And I have my analog clock in front of me. On an analog clock, there are pointers. And these pointers are called the hands of the clock. The small hand, this one is red, is called the hour hand, or the short hand is called the hour hand. And the long hand is called the minute hand. Around the edge of the clock, we have the numbers 1 through 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And each of these numbers represent an hour. The small hand tells us what hour it is. So, for example, on the clock right now, the hour hand is pointing to the 2, so it must be 2 o'clock. It's 2 o'clock on our analog clock. And this is how you write 2 o'clock. And this is how you would see 2 o'clock on a digital clock. The number 2 comes first on the left, then a colon, and then 2 zeros representing the minutes. So this is 2 o'clock, and no minutes have passed past 2. So let's try another time. Let's move time forward. It's marching on. Okay. Now, what time is it on our analog clock? We're only looking at hours right now, so we should only be looking at the short red hand that points to the hours. Did you say 4 o'clock? If you did, then you are correct. It's 4 o'clock on our clock. Another one. Here we go. Let's change the time again. What time is it, Mr. Wolf? Yep. It's 7 o'clock because the short red hour hand is pointing to the 7. It's 7 o'clock on our analog clock. Okay, let me try another. This one's a little bit more tricky. So now, what is the hour? Well, even though our hour hand is halfway between the 8 and the 9, it is still 8 o'clock because the hour does not change until the hour hand is pointing right at the next number. So all the way from the 8 all the way to just before the 9, it is still 8 o'clock. So only when this hour hand points directly at the 9 does it turn to 9 o'clock. So the hour on the analog clock right now is still 8 o'clock. Even trickier. So what hour is it right now by looking at the short red hand? If you said it's still 11 o'clock, you are correct, because even though the short red hour hand is closer to the 12, it still isn't pointing directly at the 12. So we are still in the hour of 11.